Well, I have the great opportunity to introduce our next speaker, and I told him I'm actually going to introduce him. Dave Milligan has been working with the organization since its inception, and usually, like this morning, he just starts out as Dave, but he also has a very long resume. Dave was on the Michigan Wheat Program Board with several of you in the audience when that program got up and got started. In 2015, he got very involved and represented Michigan as a board member on the National Association of Wheat Growers Board. And then in 2017, he was asked by his peers nationally and voted into the officer chain and began as secretary. So he has worked his way through from secretary to treasurer to vice president and is serving his second year as president of the National Association of Wheat Growers. Prior to that, he served on the Domestic and Trade Policy Committee, the Joint International Trade Policy, Environment and Renewable Resources Committee, Joint Biotechnology Committee, Operations and Planning, Budget, Nominating Committee, and he chaired the Research and Technology Committee. So not only did we keep him busy here, he was very busy on a national level, and I think a lot of times we don't realize how important it is to send someone out there nationally, especially as a newer organization. It was great to have a voice heard and make sure that our issues were represented, because what always works for us does not always work for other states or other regions. So with that, I'm very proud to introduce Dave, and he is going to give us an update on NAWG activities.
Well, thank you, Jody. I think I forgot half of those things that she mentioned, but it has been a very interesting and humbling experience to be part of that national organization. A little about the organization. It is 20 wheat growing states, of which we are one of the newest. We actually are the newest member, funded by dues that go to based on bushels of production. So we pay so much dues by the number of bushels we produce, and we are having issues with the national organization with drought and declining acres, and so actually we are in the process of trying to get a dues increase through, because we haven't increased them in 10 years, and all our expenses keep going up just like farming. But one of the first things that I think, when we passed the checkoff to create the Michigan Wheat Program, it was at a time in 2009 and 10 when we had an issue with falling numbers. And this is one of the things that has been worked on with the national organization. And at that time, falling numbers were not even recognized by crop insurance. And through some work by a lot of people, industry people and NAWG and everybody else, it became a recognized peril, which we thought was fine, which was fine, except for when we went to do a claim, the reimbursement was very minute compared to what the losses were. So that we sequentially have come back and gotten that to what I think is a reasonable number. And then just here in the last fall, if you had the option to buy an enhanced or step up, so that if you did have a loss, that you could step up and not have it take away from your yield average. With crop insurance, if you have a loss, you take it off on your bushels. So when you do your bushel average goes down, which is not a good issue as far as I'm concerned. But I think one of the hottest issue, maybe pun intended, that we've been dealing with, we appointed a committee in April of last year to look at climate change and sustainability. And certainly that is very, like I said, a hot topic in DC, and it is very important going forward. It is going to be front and center in a lot of things. Kind of one of my concerns is that may be starting to become more important than actually food production. I think as we go down this path, we certainly got to remember that we also have to produce food, not only reduce carbon. But part of the things that came out of our committee are several things that we feel these programs need to be voluntary. They need to also compensate early adopters, because a lot of nationwide and even here, a lot of wheat growers use no-till and cover crops, which are a couple of the great points where we all can improve not only soil health but reduce carbon is reducing tillage and the use of cover crops. We feel that in the wheat industry, we feel that we have a good crop, that it is very, there's a lot of living roots in a wheat crop. It's planted thick, it stays green, it covers the crop a lot of the year, a lot of roots. Also, it lends itself well to the use of cover crops. Another issue that we feel is, we've grown wheat for centuries? We know how to measure it. How do you measure carbon? Have you seen a bushel of carbon lately? I mean, there's a lot of issues, and we know how to grade it and market it, and hopefully we know how to get paid for it. But one of my kind of biggest concerns is that we grow wheat, we take it to an elevator, and they take it to a terminal, and they take it to a miller, and they take it make it flour, and they make it big, and they make bread out of it, and they take it to a warehouse, and they take it to a store, and we get done. You buy a $2 or $3 loaf of bread that has 10 or 15 cents worth of wheat in it. Now, there definitely is a lot of transportation, a lot of value added to that. But if we're going to be in the business of reducing carbon, where does that happen? It happens in our field, right? Is there any value added to that? Is it milled? Is it made into flour? Baked? No, it's not. Is it transported? No, it's not. So we really need to make sure that the credit for this comes back to where it happens, and that's on our farms. This isn't the only issue. Jody touched on it, I think, a little bit. As farmers, I'm still a farmer. Not quite as active as I used to be, but it takes a little time to do some of these other things. But we're always concerned about, and rightly so, how to get more yield, better quality. What's the best variety to get? But there's a lot of issues in Washington, D.C. that have a lot of effect on what happens in our operations. We're already starting to make plans for our priority points for the 2023 Farm Bill that's coming up quite rapidly. We certainly think we need to take a look at reference price. We're very adamant, I guess, that we want to make sure that we can maintain crop insurance. And research dollars. There's a U.S. wheat and barley scab initiative that just in recent years, the funding for that used to be about $5 or $6 million. We've got that up to the $10 or $12 million range. We actually see some of those dollars come back here to Michigan, at Michigan State University, to help in the research. We're also part of the Michigan Wheat Improvement Committee, which is also trying to advocate for new funds for wheat resiliency program, which will cover a lot more diseases, and trying to get permanent funding for that. And Dr. Eric Olson, who you'll hear this afternoon, is actually been chair of that. I think he maybe still has a little time left. So we certainly have greatly appreciate having his expertise on that committee. But there's a whole range of issues, we've seen the tax issues come up about basis and inheritance tax. There's waters of the U.S. Another big issue that we've dealing with and have dealt with is the pesticide regulations. There was a lawsuit that we were part of. Michigan National Wheat Growers were actually the lead in that, when glyphosate wanted to be labeled in California as under Prop 65, that it had to be labeled as carcinogenic. We won the first round of that lawsuit. It's now being appealed, so I don't know where it's going to go. We're actually now presently joined a group including soybeans and sugar. I'm not going to get to the technical name, but it's Laura's band. The issues that it's having, and that is not only the issue with the product, there's an issue with the procedure that has been kind of changed, taking a shortcut trying to regulate that product. And I think that's basically a lot more what the lawsuit's about. And trade is always very important in the wheat industry, when over half the wheat's exported. And along with the trade issue, we're always lobbying, always concerned about transportation issues, whether it's rail, whether it's barge. It's very important that we move those products, and maybe not only move our wheat out, but move our supply products in. Certainly we're trying to keep a close eye and get what information we can about these supply issues like everybody else. We're certainly having a lot of concerns about that. But that's kind of a brief update of what we're looking at, what we've done. And I guess if there's a couple questions, I don't want to get into the next speaker's time too much. There's a couple quick questions. Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of covered that in the reference price. There will be discussions about that. Yes, yeah, it makes a lot of sense when you insure basically it's a floor plan, right? It's an insurance product basically in a way, and when you insure your house, the value goes up. You raise the insurance value, right? Well, I think the value of our product went up, so thankfully.